The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Once, when I was 6, I saw a magnificent picture in a book about the jungle called True Stories. It showed a boa constrictor swallowing a wild beast. Here is a copy of the picture. In the book, it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey. Boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing. Afterward, they are no longer able to move, and they sleep during the 6 months of their digestion. In those days, I thought a lot about jungle adventures, and eventually managed to make my first drawing using a colored pencil. My drawing number 1 looked like this. I showed the grown-ups my masterpiece and asked them if my drawing scared them. They answered, "Why would I be scared of a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. Then I drew the inside of the boa constrictor digesting an elephant. Then I drew the inside of the boa constrictor so the grown-ups could understand. They always need explanations. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups advised me to put away my drawings of boa constrictors, outside or inside, and apply myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That is why I abandoned, at the age of 6, a magnificent career as an artist. I had been discouraged by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing 2. I had been discouraged by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is exhausting for children to have to provide explanations over and over again. So then I had to choose another career, and I learned to pilot airplanes. I have flown almost everywhere in the world, and as a matter of fact, geography has been a big help to me. I could tell China from Arizona at first glance, which is very useful if you get lost during the night. So I have had, in the course of my life, lots of encounters with lots of serious people. I have spent lots of time with grown-ups. I have seen them at close range, which hasn't much improved my opinion of them. Whenever I encountered a grown-up who seemed to me at all enlightened, I would experiment on him with my drawing number 1, which I have always kept. I wanted to see if he really understood anything, but he would always answer, "That's a hat." Then I wouldn't talk about boa constrictors or jungles or stars. I would put myself on his level and talk about bridge and golf and politics and neckties. I would put myself on his level and talk about bridge and golf and politics and neckties. And my grown-up was glad to know I was such an unreasonable person. Oh my God. And my grown-up was glad to know No, I don't want to.
You said this takes like big space and you like put all this oh my gods in it just to make it a little longer, that video?
I cut it out either way.
Continue.
And my grown-up was glad to know such a reasonable person. So I lived all alone, without anyone I could really talk to, until I had to make a crash landing in the Sahara Desert 6 years ago. Something in my plane's engine had broken, and since I had neither a mechanic nor passengers in the plane with me, I was preparing to undertake the difficult repair job by myself. For me, it was a matter of life or death. I only had enough drinking water for 8 days. The first night, then, I went to sleep on the sand about 1,000 miles away from any inhabited country. I was more isolated than a man shipwrecked on a raft in the middle of an ocean. I was more isolated than a man shipwrecked on a raft in the middle of the ocean. So you can imagine my surprise when I was awakened at daybreak by a funny little voice saying, "Please, draw me a sheep." What? Draw me a sheep. I leapt up as if I had been struck by lightning. I rubbed my eyes hard. I stared, and I saw an extraordinary little pharaoh, and I saw an extraordinary little fellow staring back at me very seriously. Here is the best portrait I managed to make of him later on. But of course my drawing is much less attractive than my model. This is not my fault. My career as a painter was discouraged at the age of 6 by the grown-ups, and I had never learned to draw anything except boa constrictors outside and inside. So I stared wide-eyed at this apparition. Don't forget that I was 1,000 miles from any inhabited territory, yet this little fellow seemed to be neither lost nor dying of exhaustion, hunger, or thirst. Yet this little fellow seemed to be neither lost nor dying of exhaustion, hunger, or thirst, nor did he seem scared to death. There was nothing in his appearance that suggested a child lost in the middle of the desert 1,000 miles away from any inhabited territory. When I finally managed to speak, I asked him, "But what are you doing here?" And he repeated, very slowly and very seriously, "Please, draw me a sheep." In the face of an overpowering mystery, you don't dare disobey. Absurd as it seemed, 1,000 miles from all inhabited regions and in danger of death, I took a scrap of paper and pen out of my pocket. But then I remembered I had mostly studied geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar, and I told the little fellow, rather crossly, that I didn't know how to draw. He replied, "That doesn't matter. Draw me a sheep." Since I had never drawn a sheep, I made him one of the only... Since I had never drawn a sheep, I made him one of the only 2 drawings I knew how to make. One of the boa constrictor from the outside. And I was astounded to hear the little fellow answer, No, I don't want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. A boa constrictor is very dangerous, and an elephant would get in the way. Where I live, everything is very small. I need a sheep. Draw me a sheep." So then I made a drawing. He looked at it carefully, then said, "No, that one is already quite sick. Make another." I made another drawing. My friend gave me a kind, indulgent smile. "You can see for yourself that is not a sheep. It's a ram. It has horns." So I made a third drawing. I don't care what time it is. Thank you. So I made my third drawing, but it was rejected, like the others. "This one's too old. I want a sheep that will live a long time." So then, impatiently, since I was in a hurry to start working on my engine, I scribbled this drawing and added, "This is just the crate. The sheep you want is inside." But I was amazed to hear my young critic's face light up. "That's just the kind I wanted. Do you think this sheep will need a lot of grass?" "Why?" "Because where I live, everything is very small." "There's sure to be enough. I have given you a very small sheep." He bent over the drawing. "Not so small as all that. Look, he's gone to sleep." And that's how I made the acquaintance of the little prince. It took me a long time to understand where he came from. The little prince, who asked me so many questions, never seemed to hear the ones I asked him. It was things he said quite at random that bit by bit explained everything. For instance, when he first caught sight of my airplane — I won't draw my airplane, that would be much too complicated for me — he asked, "What's that thing over there?" Okay, I'm moving. Thank you. For instance, when he first caught sight of my airplane, I won't draw my airplane, that would be much too complicated for me, he asked, "What's that thing over there?" "It's not a thing, it flies. It's my airplane." "It's an airplane." "It's an airplane. My airplane." And I was proud to tell him I could fly. Then he exclaimed, okay. And I was proud to tell him I could fly. Then he exclaimed, "What? You fell out of the sky?" "Yes," I said modestly. "Oh, that's funny." And then the little prince broke into a lovely peal of laughter, which annoyed me a good deal. I like my misfortunes to be taken seriously. Then he added, "So you fell out of the sky too? What planet are you from?" That was when I had the first clue to the mystery of his presence, and I questioned him sharply. "Do you come from another planet?" But he made no answer. He shook his head a little, staring at my airplane. "Of course, that couldn't have brought you from very far." And he fell into a reverie that lasted a while. And he fell into a reverie that lasted a long while. Then, taking my sheep out of his pocket, he plunged into contemplation of his treasure. You can imagine how intrigued I was by this hint about other planets. I tried to learn more. "Where do you come from, little fellow? Where is this 'where I live' of yours? Where will you be taking my sheep?" After a thoughtful silence, he answered, "The good thing about the crate you have given me is that he can use it as a house after dark." "Of course, and if you're good, I'll give you a rope to tie him up during the day, and a stake to tie him to." Okay. I'm just going to drink a little water. "Of course, and if you're good, I'll give you a rope to tie him up during the day." "Of course, and if you're good, I'll give you a rope to tie him up during the day, and a stake to tie him to." This proposition seemed to shock the little prince. Tie him up? Tie him up? What a funny idea! But if you don't tie him up, he'll wander off somewhere and get lost. My friend burst out laughing again. Where could he go? Anywhere. Straight ahead. Then the little prince remarked quite seriously, "Even if he did, everything is so small where I live." And he added, perhaps a little sadly, "Straight ahead, you can't go very far." That was how I learned the second very important thing. That was how I had learned a second very important thing, which was that the planet he had come from was hardly bigger than a house. That couldn't surprise me much. I knew very well that except for huge planets like Earth, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, which have been given names, there are hundreds of others that sometimes so small that it's very difficult to see them through a telescope. When an astronomer discovered one of them, he gives it a number instead of a name. For instance, he would call it Asteroid 325. I have serious reasons to believe that the planet that the little prince came from is asteroid B612. This asteroid has been sighted only once by a telescope, in 1909 by a Turkish astronomer, who had then made a formal demonstration of his discovery at an international astronomical congress, but no one had believed him on account of the way he dressed. Grown-ups are like that. Fortunately for the reputation of asteroid B612, a Turkish dictator ordered his people, on pain of death, to wear European clothes. Fortunately, for the reputation of asteroid B612, a Turkish dictator ordered his people, on the pain of death, to wear European clothes. The astronomer repeated his demonstration in 1920, wearing a very elegant suit. And this time, everyone believed him. If I told you all these details about asteroid B612, and if I had given you its number it is on account of the grown-ups. If I've told you these details about asteroid B612, and if I've given you its number, it's on account of the grown-ups. I don't get it, but okay. If I've told you these details about asteroid B612, and if I've given you its number, it is on account of the grown-ups. Grown-ups like numbers. When you tell them about a new friend, they never ask questions that really matter. They never ask, what does his voice sound like? What games does he like best? Does he collect butterflies? They ask, how old is he? How many brothers does he have? How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only then do they think they know him. If you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums at the window and doves with geraniums. If you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums at the windows and doves on the roof. If you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums at the windows and doves on the roof, they won't be able to imagine such a house. You have to tell them, I saw a house worth 100,000 francs. Then they exclaim, what a pretty house. So if you were to tell them, the proof for the little prince's existence was that he was delightful. I just need water. So if you were to tell them, the proof of the little prince's existence is that he was delightful, that he laughed, and that he wanted a sheep. When someone wants a sheep, that proves he exists. They shrug their shoulders and treat you like a child. But if you tell them, the planet he came from is asteroid B612, then they'll be convinced, and they won't bother you with their questions. That's the way they are. You must not hold it against them. Children should be very understanding of grown-ups. But of course, those of us who understand life couldn't care less about numbers. I should have liked to begin the story like a fairy tale. I should have liked to say, once upon a time, there was a little prince who lived on a planet hardly bigger than he was and who needed a friend. For those who understand life, that would sound much truer. The fact is that I don't want my book to be taken lightly. Telling these memories is so painful for me. It's already been 6 years since my friend went away, taking his sheep with him. If I try to describe him here, it's so that I won't forget him. It's sad to forget a friend. Not everyone has had a friend. And I might have become like the grown-ups who are no longer interested in anything but numbers. Which is still another reason why I've bought a box of paints with some pencils. It's hard to go back to drawing, at my age, when you've never made any attempts since the one you made of a boa from inside and the one of a boa from outside, and the one from the boa of outside, and the one of a boa from outside, at the age of 6. I'll certainly try to make my portraits as true to life as possible, but I'm not entirely sure of succeeding. One drawing works, and the next is no longer. One drawing works, and the next no longer bears any resemblance. And I'm a little off on his height too. In this one, little prince is too tall, and here he's too short. And I'm uncertain about the color of his suit. So I grope in one direction and another as best I can. In the end, I'm sure to get certain more important details all wrong, but here you'll have to forgive me. My friend never explained anything. Perhaps he thought I was like himself. But I, unfortunately, cannot see a sheep through the sides of a crate. I may be a little like the grown-ups. I must have grown old.